1861. Coyote Gulch in Washington Territory. Cleo Crawford stepped off the supply wagon into knee-deep snow and stared at the cabin her uncle left her along with $4,000 in unpaid loans and a bank auction notice dated 3 weeks out. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and the chimney leaked smoke into the wind. Zachariah Brennan waited by the corral with a land deed folded in his coat and an offer that would clear her debts if she signed today.
I inherited a trap, not a home.
She dropped her satchel in the snow and walked past him to the door.
Your uncle owed me for 2 seasons of guide work. I bought his debt from the bank last month. Sign the deed and walk away with enough to start over in Portland.
She turned and met his eyes.
And if I don't sign?
Then you fight the auction alone and lose everything by Christmas.
He pulled a folded paper from his vest and held it out. She took it and read the offer while snow collected on her shoulders. The sum was fair, but the cabin was all she had left of family and the only shelter between here and the Columbia. Inside the cabin, she found the trunk her uncle never mentioned, and inside the trunk, a Bible with pages cut out and replaced by hand-copied passages that named Graham Merrick as the man who burned a Shoshone winter camp 6 years back and blamed it on raiders to cover a silver claim. Zachariah stood in the doorway and watched her lift the book.
Where did you get that?
It was my uncle's. These pages, someone rewrote them.
She turned the book so he could see the ink and the careful script that detailed dates and witnesses. His jaw tightened, and he took the Bible from her hands.
Merrick told the marshal it was Nez Perce raiders. My cousin and his wife died in that fire.
Then this is proof. He lied.
Proof 6 years old that no judge will touch, because Merrick owns half the county, and the other half owes him favors.
He set the Bible on the table and turned away. She watched him walk to the fireplace and stare into the flames.
What if we make him confess?
Men like Merrick don't confess. They pay others to take the fall, or they disappear before the trial.
She crossed the room and stood beside him.
Then, we take this to the territorial governor.
The governor is 200 miles away, and winter closes the pass in a week. Merrick will know we have it before we reach the first checkpoint.
Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the shutters. She pulled her shawl tighter and made her decision.
I'm not signing your deed. I'm staying, and I'm using this cabin as a witness station when the marshal comes through.
The marshal won't come until spring, and you'll freeze or starve before then.
Then, help me survive the winter, and we'll take Merrick down together when the pass opens.
He studied her face for a long moment, and then nodded once.
You'll need firewood, supplies, and a better lock on that door. Merrick has men who'll come looking once they hear you're staying. 2 days later, 3 riders came up the trail at dusk, with scarves over their faces and rifles across their saddles. Cleo stood on the porch with a shotgun, while Zachariah positioned himself at the corner of the cabin with his Winchester. The lead rider stopped 20 yards out and called over the wind.
The rider said Merrick sent them to remind her the auction was still scheduled, and any delays would cost her extra fees.
Tell Merrick I'm not selling, and I'm not leaving.
The rider leaned forward in his saddle. He said the town was worried about sickness, and strangers weren't welcome until the doctor cleared them.
We're not sick, and we're not leaving. Turn around.
The rider sat motionless for a moment, and then the lead man tipped his hat and reined his horse back down the trail. Zachariah lowered his rifle, but kept watching until they disappeared into the trees.
That was a warning. Next time they'll come at night.
Then, we take turns on watch.
He turned and looked at her.
You know how to shoot that?
My uncle taught me when I was 12. I can hit a coyote at 50 yards.
Good. Because Merrick's men shoot back.
That night, she took first watch, while Zachariah slept on the cot near the fire. She sat by the window with the shotgun across her lap and watched the snow fall in the moonlight. The forest was silent, except for the wind and the occasional crack of a branch breaking under ice. At midnight, she heard horses and woke Zachariah without a sound. He moved to the door and listened. 2 shadows moved past the window, and a third tested the door latch. Zachariah raised one finger to his lips and motioned her to the far wall. She moved silently and raised her shotgun. The latch rattled, and then a boot hit the door hard enough to crack the frame. Zachariah fired once through the wood, and the boot steps scrambled back. Voices shouted outside, and horses bolted down the trail. He waited 10 seconds and then opened the door. Fresh blood marked the snow, but no one lay wounded.
They're testing us, seeing if we'll run.
I'm not running.
I know. That's what worries me.
He pulled the door shut and wedged a chair under the latch. She set the shotgun down and started rebuilding the fire.
How long will Merrick keep this up?
Until the auction passes, or until he finds another way to clear you out. He's got a mining claim surveyed 2 miles north, and he needs this land to access the water rights.
Then he's going to lose.
Zachariah watched her stoke the flames, and for the first time since he arrived, he let himself believe she might be right. The next morning, they walked down to the creek for water and found tracks where someone had watched the cabin from the ridge. Zachariah followed the trail until it joined a larger path heading toward town.
Merrick's keeping eyes on us. He knows every move we make.
Let him watch. We're not doing anything wrong.
Wrong doesn't matter to him. He wants you gone, and he'll twist the law until it fits his story.
She filled the pail and started back toward the cabin. He followed with his rifle ready. Halfway up the slope, she stopped and turned.
Why are you helping me? You could take the deed and disappear.
Because that Bible names my family, and if I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I traded justice for land.
That's not the only reason.
He met her eyes and didn't deny it.
No, it's not.
She held his gaze for a moment and then kept walking. That afternoon, a rider came from town with a notice from the territorial health inspector declaring the gulch under quarantine due to reports of fever and requiring all residents to report for examination within 3 days. Cleo read the notice twice and handed it to Zachariah.
There's no fever here. This is Merrick.
He's using the epidemic panic to force you into town, where he controls the inspector and the outcome. If you go, they'll claim you're sick and lock you up until after the auction.
And if I don't go?
They'll send a marshal to enforce the quarantine and arrest you for public endangerment.
She folded the notice and set it on the table.
Then we go to town together and we make sure the inspection is public. If Merrick wants to lie, he'll have to do it in front of witnesses. They rode into town on the 3rd day with the Bible wrapped in oilcloth and hidden in Cleo's saddlebag. The streets were nearly empty, and the few people they passed moved quickly with handkerchiefs over their mouths. The inspector's office sat next to the land office, and a crowd of 20 waited outside in the cold. Zachariah tied the horses and followed Cleo to the end of the line. A man in a black coat and a clerk's collar stepped out of the land office and walked toward them.
Graham Merrick smiled and tipped his hat. He said it was a blessing to see her in town, and he hoped she was feeling well.
I'm perfectly healthy, Mr. Merrick.
Merrick's smile didn't waver. He said he was glad to hear it, and he trusted the inspection would confirm her condition, so the town could rest easy.
We're here for the inspection, not for conversation.
Merrick turned his attention to Zachariah. He said he remembered Zachariah's family, and he offered his sympathies for their loss, then added that dwelling on the past only brought more suffering.
Some pasts need to be remembered.
Merrick's smile faded slightly. He said memory could be a dangerous thing when it clouded judgment, then excused himself and walked back into the land office. Cleo watched him go.
He knows we have something.
He's guessing. Don't give him certainty.
The line moved slowly, and by the time they reached the door, the sun was setting. The inspector was a thin man with wire glasses and hands that shook when he wrote. He examined Cleo first, checking her eyes and throat, and asking questions about fever and cough. She answered calmly, and he marked her as clear. Zachariah went next and received the same clearance. As they turned to leave, the inspector called them back. He said there was one more requirement: a signed statement confirming they had no contact with infected persons in the past 30 days.
We've been alone at the cabin. No one else has been near us.
The inspector slid 2 papers across the desk. He said the statement was a formality, but required by territorial law, and he needed both signatures before he could issue the clearance. Zachariah picked up the paper and read it carefully. The statement included a clause surrendering any property claims in the event of quarantine violation.
This isn't a health form. This is a land waiver.
The inspector adjusted his glasses. He said it was standard language and necessary to protect the town from liability.
We're not signing this.
The inspector's hands shook harder. He said refusal to sign would be noted as non-compliance, and the marshal would be notified.
Let him be notified. We're not signing away her land.
Zachariah took Cleo's arm and led her out of the office. On the street, Merrick waited with 2 men flanking him. He said it was unfortunate they chose not to cooperate, and the marshal would arrive by morning to enforce the quarantine.
There is no quarantine. You invented it to steal my land.
Merrick's expression turned cold. He said accusations without evidence were slander, and he would hate to see her face legal trouble on top of her other burdens, then suggested she reconsider her position before it was too late.
She's got nothing to reconsider, and if your men come near her cabin again, they'll leave in worse shape than they arrived.
Merrick studied Zachariah for a moment. He said violence would only make things harder, and he prayed they would find wisdom before someone got hurt, then turned and walked away with his men following. Cleo waited until they were out of sight.
He's going to send the marshal, and we'll lose everything.
Not if we move first. There's a territorial judge in Olympia. If we ride tonight, we can reach him before Merrick knows we're gone.
That's a 4-day ride in winter. The pass could close before we get back.
Then we ride fast, and we don't stop. They left town at full dark and rode through the night with the Bible secured in Zachariah's saddlebag. The pass was treacherous with ice, and twice Cleo's horse nearly slipped on the switchbacks. Zachariah stayed close and guided her through the worst sections. By dawn, they were 15 miles from town, and the snow was falling harder. They stopped to rest the horses, and Zachariah checked the trail behind them. No one's following yet. Merrick won't know we're gone until his man checks the cabin this morning.
How long do we have?
Maybe 6 hours before he figures out where we're headed. After that, he'll send riders to cut us off before we reach the judge.
She pulled her shawl tighter and remounted. They rode through the day without stopping, and by nightfall they reached a trapper's shelter, where they could rest out of the wind. Zachariah built a small fire, and Cleo unpacked the bread and dried meat they carried. They ate in silence, and then sat close to the flames.
What happens if the judge won't see us?
Then, we find someone who will. The territory's changing, and men like Merrick are losing their hold. We just need one honest official.
And if we don't find one?
We will.
She looked at him across the firelight.
You didn't have to come with me. You could have stayed and kept your claim.
I didn't want the claim. I wanted justice. And somewhere along the way I started wanting you safe, more than I wanted Merrick punished.
She reached across the space between them and took his hand.
I'm glad you stayed. He squeezed her hand and didn't let go.
I'm glad you didn't sign his deed.
I almost did. That first day, I thought walking away was the smart choice.
What changed your mind?
You did. When you looked at that Bible, I saw something in your face I recognized. You weren't just angry. You were still hoping the world could be fair.
I stopped hoping 6 years ago.
Then why are you here?
Because you made me start again.
She leaned closer and kissed him gently. He pulled her against him and held her while the fire burned low. Outside, the wind howled and the snow piled higher, but inside the shelter they were warm. And for the first time since her uncle died, Cleo felt like she wasn't alone. They slept in shifts and rode out before dawn. The trail descended through thick forest, and by midday they reached the outskirts of Olympia. The judge's office was in the territorial courthouse, and a clerk told them he was in session until 4. They waited on a bench in the hallway with the Bible between them. At 4, the doors opened and a line of men filed out. The judge was last. A tall man with gray hair and a stern expression. Zachariah stood and blocked his path.
Judge Harper, we need 5 minutes of your time. It's about a land fraud and a cover-up that's 6 years old.
The judge stopped and looked at them. He said he didn't hear cases in the hallway, and they would need to file a formal complaint.
We don't have time for formal complaints. The man we're accusing is named Graham Merrick, and he's using a fake quarantine to steal my land while covering up a crime that killed innocent people.
The judge's expression shifted. He said Merrick's name was familiar, and he had heard rumors, but never seen evidence.
We have evidence.
Zachariah handed him the Bible. The judge opened it and read the replaced pages carefully. When he finished, he looked up. He said this was serious, and if it was accurate, it implicated Merrick in arson and multiple deaths, then asked how they came to possess it.
It was my uncle's. He was there when it happened, and he documented everything before he died.
The judge closed the Bible. He said he would review the document and issue a summons for Merrick to appear. But he warned them that Merrick had connections, and the process could take weeks.
We don't have weeks. He's got men coming after us right now, and if we don't get back to Coyote Gulch before the auction, she loses everything.
The judge considered this. He said he could issue an emergency injunction halting the auction pending investigation, and he would dispatch a marshal to escort them back and serve Merrick with the summons.
When can we leave?
The judge said first light tomorrow, and he instructed them to stay in town overnight under marshal protection. They spent the night in a boarding house under the watch of a deputy marshal. Cleo couldn't sleep and sat by the window watching the street. Zachariah joined her an hour before dawn.
You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long ride.
I keep thinking about what happens when we get back. Merrick won't just accept the injunction. He'll fight it.
Let him fight. We've got the law on our side now.
The law didn't help your family 6 years ago.
Because no one had proof. Now we do.
She turned from the window.
What if it's not enough?
Then, we keep fighting until it is.
At first light, the marshal arrived with 2 deputies, and they rode out together. The trip back took 3 days because the marshal insisted on a slower pace to avoid ambush. They reached Coyote Gulch on the afternoon of the 3rd day and found Merrick waiting at the cabin with 6 men. The marshal rode forward and dismounted. He announced he was serving an injunction halting the auction and a summons for Merrick to appear before Judge Harper in 10 days. Merrick took the papers and read them without expression. He said there must be some mistake and he had done nothing wrong, then suggested the judge had been misled by false testimony. The marshal said the judge would determine the truth, and Merrick was required to appear or face arrest. Merrick folded the papers and looked past the marshal to Cleo and Zachariah. He said he looked forward to clearing his name, and he prayed they were prepared to answer for their slander, then mounted his horse and rode off with his men following. The marshal waited until they were out of sight. He said he would stay in the area until the hearing to make sure there was no retaliation, then asked if they needed anything.
We need firewood and supplies. We've been gone 4 days.
The marshal nodded and dispatched one of his deputies to town for provisions. Cleo and Zachariah dismounted and walked to the cabin. Inside, everything was as they left it, except for a note pinned to the table. The note was in Merrick's handwriting. It said the judge could delay justice, but not prevent it, and when the hearing was over, he would return to claim what was rightfully his.
He's trying to scare us.
It's working.
He won't come back. Once Harper hears the evidence, he'll issue a warrant.
And if Harper sides with him?
He won't.
She wanted to believe him, but the fear had taken root.
Your family had evidence too. Look where it got them.
My family didn't have a judge willing to listen. We do.
The deputy returned with supplies and helped them unload. The marshal posted one deputy at the tree line and took the other with him to patrol the road. Cleo built a fire in the stove and cooked a simple meal, while Zachariah checked the perimeter. They ate in silence, and when the dishes were cleared, she sat by the fire and tried to mend a torn sleeve. Her hands shook too much to thread the needle.
Come here.
She looked up. He was standing by the window, watching the darkening hills.
What is it?
Nothing. Just come here.
She set down the sewing and crossed to him. He put an arm around her shoulders, and they stood together, watching the last light fade.
You asked me once why I came to buy your land.
You said you wanted to stop Merrick.
That's true. But it's not the whole truth.
She waited.
6 years ago, I left this valley because I couldn't stand to see what Merrick had done. Every time I looked at that ridge where my family died, I felt the rage building, and I knew if I stayed, I would kill him. So I left. I guided settlers through the mountains and told myself I was done with this place.
He paused.
Then I heard about your husband dying, and the debt he left you. I heard Merrick was circling, and the bank was ready to auction. And I thought this was my chance. I could buy your land cheap, consolidate it with the surrounding parcels, and force Merrick out. It wasn't about justice. It was about revenge.
What changed?
You.
He turned to face her.
You didn't run. You didn't sell cheap and disappear. You stood your ground even when everyone else gave up on you. And then you risked everything to help me find the truth about my family. You gave me something I didn't know I needed.
What's that?
A reason to hope instead of hate.
She felt tears rising, but didn't look away.
I'm scared.
I know.
Not just of Merrick. I'm scared of what happens after. If we win this fight, what do we have? A failing ranch and a mountain of debt. If we lose everything.
If we win, we have each other. That's more than I thought I'd ever have again.
She leaned into him, and he held her close. Outside, the wind picked up, and the temperature dropped. The marshal kept his word. For the next week, he and his deputies maintained a steady presence. Merrick sent riders twice to observe, but they kept their distance. On the 8th day, a messenger arrived from town, with news that the hearing was set for the following afternoon. The marshal said he would escort them personally, and they should be ready to leave at dawn. That night, Cleo couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, listening to the fire crackle, and thinking about everything that could go wrong. Across the cabin, Zachariah was awake too.
You should rest.
I can't.
Harper's a fair man. He'll see through Merrick's lies.
What if the evidence isn't enough? What if Merrick bribes him?
Then, we start over somewhere else.
I don't want to start over. I want to stay here.
Then we fight for it.
She sat up.
You keep saying that. But what if fighting isn't enough? What if we do everything right and still lose?
We won't.
You don't know that.
No. But I know we're stronger together than either of us was alone. That has to count for something.
She wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lay back down and pulled the blanket close. Eventually, exhaustion won, and she slept. At dawn, they rode out with the marshal and his deputies. The sky was overcast and the wind cut through their coats. They reached town by mid-afternoon and found a crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Word of the hearing had spread, and half the valley had turned out to watch. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harper sat behind a heavy oak desk reviewing documents. He was a lean man in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. He looked up when they entered and nodded to the marshal, then told everyone to take their seats. Merrick arrived moments later with his lawyer and several witnesses. He smiled at Cleo as he passed, and she felt her stomach turn. The judge called the hearing to order and asked the marshal to present his case. The marshal stood and explained the injunction request, then called Zachariah to testify. Zachariah described finding the surveyor and the forged documents. He recounted the surveyor's testimony about Merrick paying him to falsify records. Merrick's lawyer objected and said the surveyor's word alone was not sufficient proof. The judge asked if there was additional evidence. Zachariah produced the original survey maps and the forged versions side by side. The judge examined them carefully. He pointed out discrepancies in the boundary lines and asked Merrick's lawyer to explain. The lawyer said mistakes in surveying were common and proved nothing. The judge turned to Merrick. He asked if Merrick had any knowledge of the altered documents. Merrick stood and said he had relied on professionals to handle such matters, and if there were errors, they were unintentional. He added that he had acted in good faith throughout, and suggested that Zachariah was motivated by an old grudge over a tragic accident that occurred years ago. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised a hand for silence. He asked Zachariah to respond.
It wasn't an accident. Merrick hired men to drive my family off land he wanted for a mining claim. When they refused to leave, he had them killed.
Merrick's lawyer objected again and said there was no proof of such a claim. The judge asked if Zachariah had evidence.
I have the testimony of the surveyor who worked for Merrick at that time. He witnessed the orders being given.
The judge asked where this surveyor was now.
He's dead. But before he died, He told me everything.
Merrick's lawyer said hearsay from a dead man was inadmissible. The judge agreed. Cleo stood.
I have something.
The judge looked at her. He asked what she meant.
Merrick came to my cabin 2 weeks ago. He said he wanted to buy my land before the auction. He told me if I didn't sell, he would make sure I regretted it.
Merrick's lawyer said that was a private conversation and proved nothing.
He also said he had done the same thing to others who refused him. He said some people learned the hard way.
The judge asked if anyone else had heard this conversation.
No. But I'm not lying.
The judge sat back and thought for a long moment. He said the evidence was compelling, but not conclusive. He said he would take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling within 3 days. He dismissed the court. Outside, the crowd dispersed slowly. Merrick walked past without looking at them. His lawyer stopped and said they should prepare for disappointment. The marshal said they should return to the cabin and wait. The ride back was silent. When they arrived, the deputy was waiting with news that riders had been seen near the property line earlier that day. The marshal doubled the watch and told them to stay inside after dark. That night, Cleo sat by the fire, unable to eat.
He's going to get away with it.
We don't know that yet.
Harper didn't believe us. I could see it in his face.
He's being careful. That's different.
Careful means he's looking for a reason to side with Merrick. Everyone does.
Not everyone.
She looked at him.
Who's on our side? The marshal's just doing his job. The judge is weighing politics. The town wants this over so they can go back to normal. We're alone.
You're wrong.
He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather Bible. He opened it and showed her the pages. Some had been cut out and replaced with new ones in a different hand.
This was my mother's. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to read it. When I finally did, I found these.
He turned to a replaced page. It was covered in small, neat handwriting.
She knew Merrick was coming for us. She wrote down everything he said and did. Dates, names, threats. She hid it in the one place she knew I'd eventually look.
Why didn't you show this to the judge?
Because I wanted to see if he'd do the right thing without it. If he rules against us, I'll take this to the territorial governor. Merrick won't be able to bribe his way out of that.
She took the Bible carefully. The pages detailed months of escalating intimidation. Merrick's men destroying fences, poisoning livestock, threatening violence. The final entry was dated 2 days before the fire.
She knew she was going to die.
She knew, and she made sure he wouldn't get away with it.
Cleo closed the Bible and handed it back.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. She gave me what I needed. Not vengeance. Justice.
3 days later, the marshal arrived with the judge's ruling. Harper had found insufficient evidence to prove Merrick's direct involvement in altering the surveys, but enough irregularities to warrant a full investigation. He ordered the auction postponed indefinitely and appointed an independent surveyor to verify all boundary claims in the valley. He also issued a warning that any further intimidation or harassment would result in immediate arrest. Cleo read the document twice to make sure she understood.
We won?
We bought time. That's close enough.
The marshal said the independent surveyor would arrive within the week, and the investigation would take at least a month. He added that Merrick had left town immediately after the ruling, and no one knew where he'd gone. The marshal said his men would continue patrols until the investigation concluded, then rode off. Cleo and Zachariah stood in the yard watching him disappear down the trail.
What do we do now?
We fix the fence, chop firewood, get the cabin ready for winter.
That's it?
That's everything.
She laughed, and it felt strange after so many days of tension.
I thought you'd want to celebrate.
I am celebrating. I'm standing on land that's still yours, with a woman who didn't give up.
She turned to face him.
Our land.
What?
You said it's still mine. It's ours. We're in this together.
I don't have anything to offer. No money. No.
You have yourself. That's enough.
He smiled, and it changed his whole face.
You're sure?
I've never been more sure of anything.
He pulled her close and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper. When they broke apart, she was breathless.
We should go inside. It's getting cold.
In a minute.
She kissed him again, and this time, he didn't hold back. When they finally went inside, the fire had burned low. Zachariah added wood, while Cleo lit the lamps. They moved around the small space in comfortable silence, each aware of the other in a way that felt new and settled at the same time. That evening, they ate together and talked about the future.
We'll need to hire help come spring. The ranch can't run with just 2 people.
I know some men from the reservation who need work. Good workers. Honest.
Can we afford them?
We'll figure it out.
What about the debt?
The independent survey will prove Merrick manipulated the records. Once that's official, the bank will have to renegotiate.
You sound confident.
I am. We made it this far.
She reached across the table and took his hand.
Thank you.
For what?
For not giving up on me. For fighting when I wanted to run.
You did the same for me.
They cleared the dishes and sat by the fire. The wind outside had died down, and the night was still. After a while, Zachariah stood and held out his hand.
Come outside with me.
It's freezing.
Just for a minute.
She took his hand and followed him out. The night was clear and cold, the stars sharp overhead. He led her to the corral where the lantern hung on the fence post.
I wanted to do this. Right.
Do what?
Ask you properly. Cleo Crawford, will you let me stay? Not as a hired hand or a partner. As your husband.
She felt tears rising, but smiled through them.
You're asking me to marry you beside a corral in the middle of winter?
Is that a problem?
No. It's perfect.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
He kissed her again, slower this time, and she felt the last of her fear melt away. When they broke apart, she laughed.
We're going to freeze out here.
Probably.
And we still have a ranch to save and a winter to survive.
We'll manage.
I know we will.
They stood together under the lantern light, his arms around her, her head against his chest. The wind picked up again, but neither of them moved. They had fought too hard to rush this moment. After a while, they went back inside and closed the door against the cold. The fire was warm, the cabin was theirs, and the future was waiting. She inherited a failing ranch and a mountain of debt. Then he came to steal her land. Coyote Gulch, Washington Territory, 1861. Cleo Crawford is drowning in debt after her husband's death, her land circled by ruthless claim jumpers. Zachariah Brennan arrives to buy her out, But his real motive is revenge against the man who killed his family. When a deadly epidemic turns neighbors cruel, and a town vote threatens everything, they must choose between vengeance and a dangerous alliance. In the frozen mountain pass, two broken people discover that survival demands more than grit. It demands trust. Subscribe for more epic Wild West romance stories of danger, resilience, and second chances. Wild West romance, historical Western story, frontier love story, cowboy romance, 1860s Washington Territory, enemies to lovers Western, ranch inheritance drama, Native American hero, revenge and redemption, homesteader survival, blizzard romance, Western thriller, land claim fight, found family Western, ACK, tie-in romance audiobook, colorized late 1800s American West photograph. Natural light, gentle contrast, slightly soft focus, subtle film grain, faint dust/scratches, slight vignetting, no text, no watermark. Woman in her late 20s, with dark auburn hair and a loose bun, hazel eyes, wearing a burgundy dress and gray wool shawl, stands close beside a man in his early 30s, with long black hair, partially braided, dark brown eyes, wearing a beaded buckskin jacket and leather vest. She looks up at him with a mix of defiance and vulnerability, tears glistening in her eyes, her hand gripping his arm. He gazes down at her with protective intensity, his jaw set, his hand covering hers. They stand in the doorway of a rough log cabin, with snow swirling around them in a late October blizzard. Heavy gray storm clouds loom overhead. Snowdrifts pile against the cabin walls, and the dim amber glow of firelight spills from the open door behind them. Foreground shows wind-blown snow and boot prints in fresh powder. Midground, the couple in the doorway, framed by rough-hewn logs. Background, the shadowed tree line and the faint outline of a corral fence disappearing into the storm. Photorealistic cinematic style. Shot on cinema camera. Natural golden hour lighting. Shallow depth of field with soft bokeh background. Warm beige and amber color grading. Looks like a film still from a premium Western romance movie. Authentic 1800s period photography aesthetic. Professional portrait photog. Rafi quality. .u/thumbelt. Background shows the dim cabin interior, with a cast iron stove glowing faintly, rough wooden table with a single candle, and the door left slightly open, revealing snow-covered ground outside. Foreground shows scattered papers and a tin cup on the table. Midground, the couple reading the threatening note. Background, the cabin walls with hanging supplies and a rifle propped in the corner. Late afternoon light filters through a single window, creating long shadows across the floor. The note said they had 7 days to vacate or face consequences, and it was signed with a single initial. M. Zachariah crumpled the paper and threw it into the stove.
He's trying to scare us before the hearing.
It's working.
The marshal's here. Merrick won't risk anything with the law watching.
But the marshal couldn't stay forever, and they both knew it. That night they sat by the fire, while the deputy brought supplies from town. The deputy mentioned that Merrick had been spreading rumors about the epidemic, claiming Cleo and Zachariah had brought sickness from the city and should be quarantined. Several families had already left the area out of fear. The town council had called an emergency meeting for the following night to discuss a quarantine measure. If it passed, anyone suspected of exposure would be banned from town until spring.
That's insane. We weren't anywhere near the outbreak.
The deputy shrugged and said fear made people believe anything, especially when the speaker sounded righteous. He left at dusk, and Cleo paced the cabin.
If they quarantine us, we can't attend the hearing. Merrick wins by default.
We'll attend. The marshal won't enforce a quarantine without proof.
What if the council votes before the hearing?
Then we go to the meeting tomorrow and stop the vote.
She stopped pacing and looked at him.
Half the town thinks you're a savage, and the other half thinks I'm a cursed widow. They won't listen to us.
Then, we make them listen.
The next evening they rode into town with the marshal. The council meeting was held in the church, and the room was packed. Merrick stood near the front, dressed in a black suit with a Bible tucked under his arm. When Cleo and Zachariah entered, the crowd went silent. The council chairman called the meeting to order, and Merrick stood to speak. He said, the epidemic was a judgment on those who defied natural order, and the town had a duty to protect itself from contamination. He said certain individuals had traveled to infected areas and returned without regard for their neighbors' safety. He said a quarantine was not only prudent, but morally required, and he urged the council to vote immediately. Several people nodded in agreement. The chairman asked if anyone wished to speak against the measure. Cleo stepped forward before Zachariah could stop her.
This isn't about sickness. It's about land. Graham Merrick wants my property, and he's using fear to take it. We have proof he's been sabotaging claims and bribing officials. The judge in Olympia has already issued an injunction.
Merrick smiled and opened his Bible. He said it was tragic to see grief twist a person's mind, and he prayed she would find peace. He said he had only ever offered to help her in her time of need. And these accusations were the ravings of a desperate woman who refused honest assistance. The crowd murmured, and the chairman raised his hand for silence. He said, accusations required evidence, and without proof, the council must focus on public safety.
The proof is in Olympia with Judge Harper. The hearing is in 6 days. If you vote for this quarantine, you're letting Merrick control you through lies.
Merrick shook his head slowly. He said it was unfortunate that an outsider would question the judgment of decent people, and he suggested the council proceed with the vote. The chairman called for a show of hands. Half the room raised their hands in favor. The chairman was about to declare the measure passed when the church door opened, and the marshal stepped inside. He said he had jurisdiction over public health matters during territorial disputes, and he was ordering a postponement of the vote until after the judge's ruling. He said anyone who disobeyed would be charged with obstruction. Merrick's smile faded. He said the marshal was overstepping his authority, and the people had a right to protect themselves. The marshal said the people also had a right to due process, and he would enforce that right with force if necessary. The room fell silent. The chairman adjourned the meeting without a vote, and the crowd filed out slowly. Merrick approached Cleo and Zachariah as they left the church. He said they had made a grave mistake opposing him, and he hoped they were prepared for the consequences. He said the judge might rule in their favor, but judges could be replaced, and rulings could be overturned. He said land had a way of finding its rightful owner, and no amount of legal maneuvering would change that.
You're right about one thing. Land finds its rightful owner. And you're not it.
Merrick's expression hardened. He said Zachariah would regret those words, then turned and walked away. The marshal escorted them back to the cabin and posted a deputy outside for the night. Inside, Cleo sat by the fire and stared into the flames.
We can't keep living like this. waiting for him to make the next move.
We won't have to, after the hearing.
And if we lose?
We won't.
But if we do?
He knelt beside her chair.
Then, we start over somewhere else. Together.
She looked at him, searching his face.
You'd do that? Leave everything?
I came here to bury the past. I found something worth building a future for instead.
She reached for his hand.
I don't even know if I can keep this place. The debt is still real.
We'll figure it out. One problem at a time.
The days before the hearing crawled past. Merrick's men watched the cabin from a distance but made no moves. The marshal kept his deputies close, and the town stayed quiet. On the morning of the hearing, they rode to Olympia with the marshal and arrived at the courthouse just before noon. Judge Harper was a stern man with silver hair and sharp eyes. He reviewed the documents, questioned the clerk, and listened to Merrick's attorney argue that the injunction was based on hearsay. Then, he called Zachariah to testify.
6 years ago, my family filed a claim on land near Coyote Gulch. Graham Merrick wanted it for mineral rights. When they refused to sell, their cabin burned. My parents and sister died. The sheriff ruled it an accident, but I found a canteen with Merrick's brand near the site. I've been tracking his dealings ever since. The clerk's ledger shows a pattern. He's been buying up claims through intimidation and fraud, then flipping them to mining companies.
The judge asked if Zachariah had proof of the fire's cause.
The canteen and witness testimony from a trapper who saw Merrick's men near the cabin the night before.
The judge asked where the witness was.
He died 2 years ago, but the canteen's still in my possession.
Merrick's attorney objected, saying a canteen proved nothing. The judge overruled him and asked to see it. Zachariah produced the battered canteen with Merrick's cattle brand stamped into the leather. The judge examined it, then turned to Merrick. He asked if Merrick recognized it. Merrick said his men carried dozens of canteens, and losing one proved nothing. The judge said the pattern of fraudulent transactions was more compelling than a single piece of evidence, and he was extending the injunction indefinitely, pending a full investigation. He said the auction was canceled, and the debt investigation would proceed. If fraud was confirmed, all transactions would be voided, and Merrick would face criminal charges. Court was adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Cleo stopped and turned to Zachariah.
You didn't have to tell them about your family.
Yes, I did. It was time.
What happens now?
We go home. We keep the ranch running. We wait for the investigation to finish.
And then?
Then, we figure out what comes next.
They walked to the horses. The marshal approached and said he would station a deputy near the cabin until the investigation concluded. Cleo thanked him, and they rode out. The trip back took 2 days. When they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, and the temperature was dropping fast. They unsaddled the horses and led them into the corral, then carried their saddlebags inside. Cleo built a fire, while Zachariah unpacked the supplies. When the flames were strong, she stood and brushed off her hands.
I keep thinking about what the judge said. If the investigation finds fraud, everything gets voided. That means the debt disappears.